Let's talk about mixing in Dolby Atmos. I spent the last year researching and learning to mix in Dolby Atmos, and 2 months ago I finished up the Atmos Room by Ben Macaulay, which is a 7.1.4 Dolby Atmos studio here in Lekki. And so far, the news has begun to spread slowly that I'm currently the Dolby Atmos daddy of Lagos. Alright, so today I'm going to show you how you can get started in mixing in Dolby Atmos so that you too can become Dolby Atmos sons and daughters. Alright, I'm going to explain in simple terms what Dolby Atmos is and let you in on some basic terms that you need to familiarize yourself with if you're going to be mixing in Dolby Atmos. I'm also going to be doing some basic demonstrations and talk about the two mixing workflows available in Logic Pro X and which one I prefer. By the way, I'm Benny Macaulay. In case you don't know, I'm a DJ, music producer, stereo and Dolby Atmos mixing and mastering engineer, and I make music production tutorials because I like to share gems. So if you like this video, make sure you give me a thumbs up and subscribe to stay up to date to all of the things that's going to be coming from this Atmos room, from this space, okay? You don't want to miss out. Trust me, there's a lot of dope shit about to pop off. Alright, now Dolby Atmos. Dolby Atmos is a digital audio format which uses 10 bed channels representing 7.1.2 speaker positions and 118 object channels. And this gives you a total of 128 channels to play with when you're mixing in Dolby Atmos. I'm going to explain what that means in a bit. Each object channel carries metadata 3D spatial information to the Dolby Atmos renderer, including XYZ positions, panning, spread, binaural rendering distance, movement, and much more. Now, this metadata, right, helps playback dynamically adapt to your audio system. So that means you can take the same Dolby Atmos mix and play it as binaural renders for headphones, right? Home theaters, soundbars, commercial setups up to 64 channels, your cars, and more seamlessly. Dolby Atmos is so much fun, right? It takes the listening experience beyond left and right to a whole 3D space. And this helps musicians like us create a more immersive experience for our audience, okay? So now, in case you're wondering, how do I get started with mixing in Dolby Atmos? I don't have a 7.1.4 setup. I don't have the money to invest in 11 speakers and a new sound interface that's going to cost me almost $5,000 or more, right? The good thing about Logic and the good thing about Dolby Atmos is you can actually start mixing with just your headphones in the binaural rendering mode. And then when you're done with your mix, you can book a session on Atmos Studio to come test it out to make sure everything translates properly in a proper Dolby Atmos setup. So this right here is one of the records I mixed in Dolby Atmos in my guy's EP Lamborghini. This is Story. So I'm going to use it to demonstrate some of the amazing things you can do when you mix in Dolby Atmos. But first of all, let me open a new project and show you how you can set up your project for mixing in Dolby Atmos. So let's say this is your first time trying to mix in Dolby Atmos. There's a few things you need to do. First things first, you want to go to mix, right? And then you just go and select Dolby Atmos. And when you do that, it's going to bring up the project settings. So next thing you want to do is go to Spatial Audio and set to Dolby Atmos, right? And then it's going to show you this information, right? And then you would accept. Another thing to know is when mixing Dolby Atmos, you have to mix the sample rate of 48 kilohertz. The good thing is Logic already selects that for you. And then once you've done this, you're going to close. One thing you're going to notice immediately is when you look at your master track, you're going to see the Atmos plugin has been added to it. And then this is where you're going to select your monetary format. If you're going to mix with just your headphones, you select the binaural rendering format. So there's 3 or more options here actually. There's Dolby Renderer, there's the Apple Renderer, Spatial Audio Profile, Personalized Spatial Audio, and there's head tracking if you're using the Apple Pro headphones and stuff. And then if you have a Dolby Atmos setup, you would go and select your speaker configuration. The Atmos room is currently a 7.1.4 Atmos studio, so I would select 7.1.4 if I'm mixing and I want to use my monitors, okay? But for this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to do this with the binaural rendering mode. Personally, I like the sound of the Dolby renderer. You can try the Apple renderer, but I like the Dolby renderer. It sounds more natural. There's something about this Apple renderer that just makes things sound a bit extra. It's like they make this sound a little bit wider, which feels very unnatural to me, my opinion. But this is if I'm mixing with a renderer that is native to Logic Pro, which is this Atmos renderer right here. Like I mentioned at the beginning, there are 2 workflows that is available for Logic Pro. There's this one when you're using the renderer that is native to Logic Pro, and there's also the workflow where you use the actual Dolby renderer. Let me show you what that looks like from Dolby Labs. So this is the actual Dolby renderer from Dolby Labs. This is what I prefer to use. I'm going to show you how I use this because when you're working with the Dolby renderer, you have a lot more options in my opinion with the Dolby Atmos panel. I'm going to show you all of that show you how it works. There's so much fun things you can do with the Dolby Atmos panel that comes with the renderer. And then when you create your masters with the Dolby renderer, you have the options to make a lot more render options. You can export renderers in 5.1, renderers in stereo. Like, there's so much more. You can even export your renders in MP4 formats. So that's the reason I really love using the Dolby Atmos renderer. I'm going to show you how I do that in a bit. But that does not mean that you cannot achieve great mixes with the render that comes native with Logic Pro X. Okay, you can still do that. If this is all you have available to you, you can do that. Because the Dolby render costs $300. In my opinion, it's worth it because I love the workflow. I love the way it sounds. I love being able to do all of my re-renders in all of the other formats that is available when you work with the Dolby renderer. All right. So like I said, when you're working in Dolby Atmos, you have 10 beds and you have 118 object channels, right? So this is our bed here. You have the left, right, you have the center channel, right? You have the LFE. LFE is usually off when you're working in binaural rendering mode. LFE just simply means your low frequency effects. That's where usually you would send most of your deep bass, your subs. It's basically your sub channel. When you're mixing Atmos, you get a dedicated sub channel. So it means you have the option of sending bass out to all of your monitors, as well as sending extra or more bass to your sub. I'm going to show you how I use the LFE channel in subsequent video. But if you're working with the binaural rendering formats, then the LFE is usually off. So it just means your bass will play out from the other monitors, you know, depending on what you send to that particular monitor anyways. And then, like I said, you have 118 object channels. All right, so let me show you how to add an object channel. By default, when you open the Atmos renderer, what you see is just the bed channels, right? So if you want to add an object channel, all you have to do is simply come down here, right click, and just go to 3D object panel. So when I do that, it changes this track into an object track, right? And then if you go into the Atmos render, you can see that we've added audio 2 as an object channel, right? And it reads here that we have one of 118 object channels. So right now we have 117 object channels more to add before we are maxed out. So let's dive into some more details about the beds and the object channels. Okay, like I said earlier, the bed channels are more or less speaker positions. What you can see right here now is 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 speaker positions, which is the left, center, right surround, left surround, right rear surround, left rear surround. And then if you look to your right, top right, you see the elevation button. When we elevate, it takes us to the 2 height channels that come with the bed. It's not visible here, but when you elevate the sound, it's going to send signals up to those high channels. Okay, so when you have your track in a bed, you can move your tracks across all of these speaker positions. Either you can place tracks in between or at exact speaker positions, or spread it across all of the speaker positions. It's not exactly as fluid as working with the object channel, right? If we open an object channel, for example, now double click, open, you can see that you have the option to go left, right, front, back, and then you can go up, you can go down, you can spread, you can move basically in 3D space without restrictions, right? You can literally place sounds anywhere when you're working with a 3D object panel. So that's the difference. Personally, I'll put something like my kick in a bed channel, right? Kick, bass, that kind of stuff. But to be honest, there's no rule as to what should go to your bed or your object channels. You can decide what you want to do and where you want to put them. I've actually done mixes in recent times where I have my bass in object channels. I started working with the Dolby Atmos renderer, the actual Dolby Atmos renderer, not the one that comes native with Logic. I'm going to show you that in a bit. I really like just having almost everything in object channels, right? Because there's so much more you can do, and it's so much fun to be able to just move things around without limits, right? And also something I need to show you real quick. If you are mixing in Dolby Atmos and Logic and you open up the panel, usually what you get is a mono track. But majority of the time, a lot of the tracks you're going to work with are going to be in stereo, right? So you want to change this to a stereo surround panel. And it's very simple. If you come to the channel mode, you just click and it switches this to stereo. So right now you see it kind of like spread itself to left and right. So when you're moving the sound around, you're moving the stereo signal of that sound all around your speaker positions. And you can also do stuff like change the diversity and just to make it go into other channels, or increase the spread or reduce the spread or the elevation or whatnot. Let's look at some examples real quick. For this next part of this video, I think it's very important that you use your headphones, because that's the only way you're going to be able to hear what I'm doing and get a sense of what I'm doing. Actually, let's play this song. Yeah. I don't know if you can notice, but there's a chant in the background. It goes, hey. I've automated that to go around in circles above my head. Let's solo that so we can listen to it. I think this is it, right? Right. Right. Now, this is the beautiful thing about working in binaural rendering mode. It actually recreates the actual Atmos room. So this, if I was playing from the speakers, I literally can hear it go around me in circles above my head. And with the binaural render mode, you can get the same feeling. And then let me open the Atmos plugin so you can see it. Right. So this is basically the visual representation of how the sound is moving within the room. And another reason why I like to use the Dolby render monitoring format, right? Is because you have the option of being able to adjust the distance of that sound in the channel. For example, this is the chant. I set it to near, so it feels like it's closer to me. If I put it to far, you can get the difference. It feels like it's far away from me, right? If I put it to mid, it comes a bit closer. When I put it to near, right. When you're using the Apple rendering format, everything is just kind of like set in a fixed position, right? With the Dolby renderer monitoring format, you can set your positions, which is very, very cool. I mean, mixing Dolby Atmos is so much fun, man. Like, there's so many fun things you can do. Imagine being able to automate your sounds to go beyond just left and right. For example, let's listen to this alarm. Like, this is also going in circles. It's crazy, right? Like I said, I prefer to work mostly with object channels, but it depends on what works for your mix, okay? For example, I put the vocals on a bed channel, you know, and it's playing from left and right, basically. I'm here right now. All the sacrifice don't pay now. Right. So this definitely represents my left and my right. And then if I wanted to move this around, obviously you would, you know, start. Don't go let anybody slow me down. Right. Fly away. Right. Before you break the news. But it's more advisable to leave your vocals in your front channels, okay? Like the left and right. Or if you want to reduce the spread and just put it in the center channel. Verify it. You know, the only problem with that is sometimes it starts to cause phasing issues, right? Because it's a stereo track, right? So I usually just let them sit at the left and right positions. Make you call my phone first, clarify it. Right. But if you want to listen to the full song in Dolby Atmos, it's currently available on Apple Music. The Private Party Volume 1 EP by Lamborghini was mixed in Dolby Atmos by me and the Atmos Room by Benny Macaulay. All right. Yeah, so you can go there and check out the whole thing and tell me what you think. That's basically it for this first workflow. Now, this is just mixing in Dolby Atmos with the Atmos render that comes native with Logic Pro X.